Hey tribe, Sally here. Hope you're having an amazing and fascinating day. I know I am. And I'm coming to you today from a campground in Montana, southern Montana actually at this point. Although the story I'm bringing you today is from Colorado. It's at the Sand Creek Massacre, and what I've got for you today is pretty much the entire presentation ranger talk when we were there to visit the Sand Creek Massacre site, and I just found the story absolutely fascinating. I put a really small snippet in a video that I did yesterday. I'll put a link to that up here. Um, and, as always, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch my videos. If you haven't already, please do consider becoming a member of the tribe. There's, over here, there'll be a thing on your screen that you can scan with the QR code or pick it up in the video description down below. If you're on your computer or on your phone, there's a join button on YouTube. And as always, a big shout out to all our channel members. And in fact, why don't we name you? Lisa, Barb, Johnny, Judy, and Lonnie. Two of those are channels. That's Johnny's Journey and Crafty Traveler. If you haven't checked them out, please do so. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. Leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to click notifications so that you get to see what's coming next. Hope you enjoy this one. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below.
Wake up with the sun in our eyes. Sally forth, no need for goodbyes. Journey calls, let's roll the dice. Every mile a new surprise.
Not the happy-go-lucky history you get at most national parks. It's one of those darker bits of American history. This was an attack on a Cheyenne and Arapaho camp in November of 1864. Where we are right here, that camp was on the other side of the Big Sandy Creek. And in that camp, there were about 750 people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, trying to establish a peace. And despite that, they were attacked by Colonel John Chivington and soldiers of the U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, 1st and 3rd Regiments of Colorado. Now, usually when things like that happen, it's not just 675 guys who all wake up one morning and say, you know what, we're going to go kill a bunch of people today. There's more to it than that. So we're going to leave that camp where it is in November of 1864, and we're going to back up in time a little bit more. I like to go back to 1848. Now keep in mind, there's already a lot going on out here even in 1848. You already have a lot of people living out here. You have some folks like William Bent. Are you familiar with that name?
Yep.
Yeah, one of the proprietors of Bent's Old Fort down the road. One of the prominent traders out here. Speaking of trade, you also have travelers and traders moving along the Santa Fe Trail, coming from St. Louis and points east and heading all the way down to Mexico, which was a lot closer in those days. You have fur trappers up in the mountains, collecting those animal pelts and sending them back east along those same trade routes. But these are not the majority of the people living out here at the time. Most of the people living here are members of the Plains tribes. The Cheyenne and Arapaho, of course, who I'm going to focus on, but also many others. The Kiowa, Comanche, Plains Apache, Pawnee, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota of the Sioux, and many others besides. And these plains, this environment, this is what they called home. Now, before I go any further here, I have a question for all of you. What are some of the things a place has to have for it to be home for you today?
Water.
Food.
Food.
Water's a good one. Food's good. What else?
Shelter.
Electricity.
Yeah, electricity's nice, especially on those hot days with the AC going. There's no right or wrong answer to that question. For everyone, it's a little bit different. My favorite answer I ever got was, it's where my bed is. Good answer. For the Arapaho and Cheyenne, all of those things apply to this area. By the mid-1800s, the two tribes had been out here for about 100 years or so, coming from the western Great Lakes region originally. So they knew where the resources were. Food, water, how to get shelter out here. They had family, how they fit into it. For electricity, well, they didn't have that, but at least to provide light and heat, they had buffalo chips. If you don't know what that is, go talk to the back end of a buffalo. From 300 yards away, please. And for the tribes, bed moved. They were nomadic. They moved around throughout the year. During the summers, it was common to find very large camps out here on the plains, sometimes with multiple hundreds of people. Oftentimes, they are competing with the neighboring tribes for rights to the best hunting grounds. And those rights could shift from year to year. Just because your tribe has the right to hunt in this place this year does not mean you'll have that right next year. It all depends on the prowess of your warriors in a given season. The animal they're hunting most frequently out here is the buffalo. And they got almost everything they needed from that animal. Food, clothing, shelter, of course, but also many other things. Ceremonial items, various types of tools, and, appropriate this time of year, the tail of a buffalo makes a really good fly swatter. I wish I had one someday. Now that's summer life. During the winters, there's less grasses, less forage for the horses. It's hard to maintain a large camp out here on the plains or go make war on your neighbors. And so the tribes usually broke into smaller camps and found more sheltered places to be. Along creeks or rivers, like Sand Creek, and valleys that were sheltered, sometimes near the mountains a couple hours west of here. But in 1848, things were starting to change. More white settlers were starting to travel through this area. Now, most of them were on their way a little further west to that new place, California, and the little shiny rocks being discovered out there about that same time. I'm sure you all know what that was.
Yes.
Yeah, there is gold in them there hills, as they say. But these travelers are leaving their mark on the landscape as they go. The wagons that they bring leave ruts across the landscape. And the animals they bring with them, horses, oxen, cattle, eat the grasses on either side of those trails. The same grasses the tribes depend on for their own horses. The same grasses the buffalo depend on. Now, if you look around out here, there's a lot of grass. But in some places, these new trails are wide enough, and the grass eaten far enough to either side. It could be up to 2 miles across. Buffalo won't cross it. There's no food there. Why would they? They're buffalo. They don't know there's more grass 2 miles that way. It's changing the migration patterns of the herds. It's changing life out here. Not to mention all the diseases these new people bring with them. Diseases against which the tribes have no defense, no immunity. Now, sometimes warriors from the tribes would raid these wagon trains going across the plains. The exact same thing they did to their tribal neighbors every now and again. That's just part of life out here. But for the settlers, this is not what they are used to, and these raids make it a very dangerous and scary journey. So in 1851, to try to make it a safer trip for the settlers, the U.S. government made a treaty with several of the tribes out here, including the Arapaho and Cheyenne. This was known as the Treaty of Fort Laramie, and it was essentially asking the tribes one question. Where is your home? Where do you live? Where's your territory? Now, would that be an easy question for most of you to answer today? For some it is, for some it's not. I live in Ease right now. That's my current home, that's my territory. Would that be an easy question for the tribes to answer in 1851? Not so much. Bed moves. They're not in one place all the time. But for the tribes, this question goes even deeper than just not having a home address. As far as the tribes are concerned, land ownership doesn't mean anything. You can't own land. That's impossible. The earth is part of the whole, part of the harmony of the world. You can live on it. You can be part of that harmony. You can affect that harmony by your actions for good or ill. But you can't own that. For the white man, land is wealth. Land is power. The more land you own, the better off you are. But through talks and negotiations with the tribal leaders, the U.S. government figured out the rough territories of the different tribes to the point that they could put them on a map. And for the Arapaho and Cheyenne, their territory was actually quite large. It went from the Arkansas River, about 40 miles south of here, up to the North Platte in southern Nebraska and Wyoming. Then from western Kansas into the mountains west of here. Pretty big space. But that space still has all of the things that makes this home for the Arapaho and Cheyenne. Now, as part of this treaty, settlers were to be allowed to pass through this territory unmolested, unattacked, but they could not settle here. They could not establish towns inside this territory. And in return for the damage these travelers would cause to the land, the U.S. government would give the tribes annuity every year. Things that wasn't always as easy for them to get out here on their own. Things like better tools, made out of metal instead of bone, various types of cloth, even food items like sugar, bacon, or coffee. It's a good breakfast right there. This arrangement was supposed to last forever. Anybody care to take a guess how long forever actually turned out to be?
10 years.
Less than 10 days, maybe.
There were some pretty short-lived treaties. This one was about 10 years. One of the longer ones. Still not forever in my book. In part, this one only lasted about 10 years because in 1858, more little shiny rocks were discovered in the mountains just west of here. Between 1858 and 1859, over 100,000 settlers started traveling across the plains to get to these new gold fields out here. Granted, most of them didn't make it. A lot of them got a little ways out here onto the plains, saw what it was like, said nope, turned around and went back home again. They had their idea of what home was. This wasn't it. I would have been one of them. I am from Pennsylvania originally. Yeah, it needs way more trees out here. And water.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm biased. A lot of these people also made it. They overcame the challenges of moving to a new place, a new environment for many of them, and they began establishing towns out here, some of which we still know today. Boulder, Golden, Denver City, Colorado City, what we call Colorado Springs today. But it just so happens that these towns are right in that territory that's supposed to belong to the Arapaho and Cheyenne. On paper, according to the Treaty of Fort Laramie, these new towns are illegal. And as far as the tribes are concerned, they're being invaded. This wasn't supposed to happen. And they want the U.S. government to do something to get these people out of here again. As far as the settlers are concerned, it is their manifest destiny to make these mountains a center of civilization in this country, to use the resources placed out here on land that no one claims to own. They're not going anywhere. Little awkward. To try to smooth over this situation, in 1861, the U.S. government made a new treaty with the Cheyenne and Arapaho, known as the Treaty of Fort Wise. This established a reservation for the two tribes, more the way we think of reservations today. However, it was a smaller space than that land from 1851. It went from the Arkansas River once again, but where we are here at Sand Creek was the northeast corner of that reservation. It then went about 80 miles west, with a little bit more on the northwestern corner. So kind of a cut-off rectangle in shape. And if you prefer numbers, the sides of that land from 1851. Now, the U.S. government actually recognized that this was a smaller space and life would have to change for the two tribes. They promised to send people to teach them how to farm, how to ranch, how to live a new kind of life in this smaller space. They would also double the amount of annuity goods they were supposed to be giving the tribes every year. So more tools, cloth, food items, etc. Sound like a good deal? Most of the Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs said, no way. This is not how we live. We are not going to do this. 10 chiefs, 6 Cheyenne and 4 Arapaho, saw things a little differently. They knew that times were changing. These new people were going to continue to come west. They were not going to stop. The tribes would not be able to be nomadic forever. But even if they did become ranchers or farmers, they would still be the Cheyenne, the Arapaho. They would be the people. And so those 10 chiefs did sign the treaty with the understanding that they signed for themselves and their bands, the people who followed them personally. They did not speak for the majority of the 2 tribes. Everybody else would continue to live in those larger territories established in 1851. However, after being signed out here, that treaty had to go back to Washington to be ratified and then return out here to be implemented, in part creating the territory of Colorado.
Nope.
But by that time, the understanding of the government had changed. Hey, there's 10 signatures on this treaty that must be representative of all the Cheyenne and Arapaho. They have all agreed to live in this small space. The rest of that land from 1851 is now open. Go west, young man. Make your fortune. Which was not what those 10 chiefs had intended. And that's one reason the Treaty of Fort Wise essentially failed. But there was another one, too. A little, shall we say, skirmish that started out east about that same time. Something called the American Civil War. Perhaps you've heard of it. The U.S. government is a bit more concerned about this major war going on in their backyard, and not so much about a little Indian reservation in a place that's not even a state yet. A lot of that help that was promised, the teachers to show the tribes this new way of life, the extra annuity goods, either never come or are very heavily delayed. So much that they're basically useless. So even those 10 chiefs who did sign the treaty are forced back into those larger territories just to survive. Which now means you have 2 groups of people, the tribes out here on the plains and the settlers in the ever-expanding towns, competing over the same land. Which, as I'm sure you can imagine, led to some tension in the next few years. There were still times when warriors would raid the wagon trains going across the plains, supply lines the towns out here depend on. When this happens, as far as the settlers are concerned, they're being attacked. Their safety is in question. And so soldiers would be sent out onto the plains to deal with these threats out here. But sometimes these soldiers end up attacking camps that are legitimately trying to stay out of the way, avoid all these new and different people, and be peaceful with them. When this happens, as far as the tribes are concerned, now they're being attacked with no good reason. And they will respond in kind, an eye for an eye. You can see how this would snowball a little bit. Fear, hate, and misunderstanding are growing out here on the plains. We can put that into more modern terms. I want you to take about 10 seconds and think about your home space, wherever that is. And think about how you feel when you are in that space. By the way, I sincerely hope that you feel safe there. Now imagine hearing on the news, on social media, talking with friends and neighbors, that the communities right next to yours are being attacked by a group of people. You hear this news day in, day out, every day, all the time. Has your feeling in your home space changed? If there was something you thought you could do to defend your home, your family, community, would you do it? These are, unfortunately, questions we have to ask ourselves today, in this country and all over the world. These are the same questions the people out here in the 1860s had to ask themselves as well. Fear, hate, tension grew. But there were some people on both sides who were at least trying to do something about this situation. John Evans, the governor of the Colorado Territory, had been sending many reports to Washington, D.C. about all these raids and things that were going on. Oftentimes, they were reports with a little less than 100% accuracy. But what he's asking for is for more soldiers to be sent out here to defend the towns. And on August 11th, 1864, he kind of got what he was looking for. Permission was given to raise a new regiment of volunteer cavalry. Now, this regiment would be almost exactly the same as the majority of the men fighting in the Civil War back east. It's 1864, that's still going on. This will be a federal regiment of the Union Army. The main difference is this new regiment will only serve for 100 days, as opposed to a couple years or the duration of the war, which was more common. During that 100 days, all that this new regiment was supposed to do was two things. One, to patrol the roads, the supply lines the towns out here depend on. And two, to come out here onto the plains and hunt down those threats out here. That's it. Two things. Think you can remember two things? Enlistment for this regiment began in mid-August, and by September 19th, all of the companies of the 3rd Regiment of Colorado Cavalry Volunteers were full, and their 100 days started ticking down. However, we're going to leave that regiment in Denver for a few minutes, where it is. Because at the same time men are enlisting in that regiment, other events are taking place out here on the plains. The Arapaho and Cheyenne are just as concerned about the safety of their people as the settlers are. And when the chiefs get word about this new regiment being formed, some of them are even more concerned. More soldiers on the plains means it's likely more peaceful camps will be attacked. So in late August, Chief Black Kettle of the Cheyenne had a letter written and sent to Fort Lyon, about 40 miles south of here at the time. That letter came to the attention of Major Ed Wynkoop, the commander at Fort Lyon. Now, what Black Kettle was asking for was for someone to come out and talk to them about establishing a peace for some of their non-combatants, women, children, the elderly. For Major Wynkoop, going out and talking to the Indians sounded like a terrible idea, more like a trap than anything else. But this idea of starting to establish some kind of peace was a little bit more than he could pass up. So in early September, Wynkoop took some soldiers from Fort Lyon and rode out to the Smoky Hill River area, about 50 miles northeast-ish of where we are now. And he met with Chief Black Kettle and several of the other Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs. And during that meeting, Wynkoop began to change his mind a little bit. Maybe the people living out here aren't so bad after all. Now, Wynkoop told the chiefs that he was only a major. He did not have the authority to establish the peace the chiefs wanted, but he could escort some of the chiefs to Denver to speak with Governor John Evans, who did have that authority. And that's exactly what proceeded to happen. Major Wynkoop escorted 7 chiefs to Denver, and the meeting with Governor Evans took place on September 28th. I need to move my water bottle, that got hot. Unfortunately, Governor Evans did not treat this meeting as a peace negotiation. He treated it as an interrogation, asking the chiefs many questions, mostly along the lines of what tribe attacked what ranch or wagon train on what date. The old who, what, when. These questions went on for about an hour and a half, at the end of which Governor Evans essentially told the chiefs, I'm at war with you. If you want peace, you need to talk to the military. Another man present at that meeting was Colonel John Shivington. He was the highest ranking military officer in the Denver area at the time, but all he said to the chiefs was, my rule of fighting my enemy, be he white man or Indian, is not to stop until he lays down his arms and submits to military authority. You're closer to Major Winecoop than anyone else. When you are ready to do this, you can go talk to him. Pop quiz. Who escorted the chiefs to Denver in the first place?
That'd be Major Winecoop.
Major Winecoop. We have gone around in a circle. That doesn't happen today, does it? Exactly how frustrated with this situation the chiefs were, I don't know. But they went back to their camps, they talked this over, and many of them decided they wanted to pursue this peace further. So in late October, 2 large groups, one of Arapaho, one of Cheyenne, proceeded to do this. The Cheyenne came here to Sand Creek, a known camping area for many tribes, not just those 2. Some of the chiefs traveled down to Fort Lyon and surrendered to Major Winecoop. The Arapaho actually took it a step further. They went down to Fort Lyon itself, set up their camp a couple miles away from the fort, and also surrendered to Major Winecoop. Now, Winecoop considered both camps prisoners of Fort Lyon and under military protection until he got further permission to continue negotiating peace. About 2 weeks later, in early November, some of the Cheyenne chiefs traveled down to Fort Lyon again, this time to request permission to move their camp closer to the fort, like the Arapaho had done. But in that 2 weeks, the situation at Fort Lyon had changed. Major Winecoop had been replaced as commander of the fort by another man, Major Scott Anthony, who was not nearly as sympathetic to the tribes as Winecoop had been. However, Major Anthony honored the original agreement Winecoop had made. He would still consider both camps prisoners of Fort Lyon, but he told the Cheyenne to stay here at Sand Creek, not to move closer to the fort. And a couple weeks later still, toward late November, when supplies for the Arapaho near the fort were running out, Major Anthony essentially told them to get away from the fort. Some of the Arapaho, between 50 to 70 individuals, came up here and joined the Cheyenne at Sand Creek, which, by late November, gives us the camp that I described earlier. About 750 people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, but that also included 33 chiefs and headmen. That is a large number of leaders for a camp this size. And there are many eyes watching what is going to happen here. As for the rest of the Arapaho, who had been at Fort Lyon, they went the other direction, southeast down the Arkansas River, which, not that they knew it at the time, that was a good choice. Once again, at the same time these events are happening on the plains, other events are taking place further west. Or technically not taking place. Do you remember that 3rd regiment I mentioned earlier? Those 100-day guys? What are the 2 things they're supposed to be doing this whole time?
Patrolling the roads.
Patrolling the roads? That's one. Yep. Hunt down those threats out here. That's it. Well, by mid-November, they're about 2/3 of the way through their enlistment period, and they've been doing neither of these things. They've mostly been hanging out around Denver. Granted, they have had some problems of their own. There have already been 2 full regiments outfitted from the territory, so finding supplies for a 3rd one, weapons, ammunition, horses of any kind of quality, kind of important for a cavalry unit, is proving very difficult, especially in a short period of time, not to mention training. But even with all these problems, they're still talking to towns about what the U.S. government is going to say if this federal regiment does not do what it's supposed to be doing. Especially while there's a war going on. Exactly how concerned about all this Colonel Shivington was, we don't know. Historians still debate over exactly why Shivington did what he did. But in mid-November, with no direct orders from his superiors, Shivington organized most of the 3rd Regiment and marched them east to Fort Lyon, getting there on the afternoon of November 28th. Once there, he picked up a couple companies of the 1st Regiment, who had been stationed down there for several months. And at 8 o'clock that same night, those 675 men began to ride north, through the night, to the camp that they know is here. And they get here about dawn the next day, November 29th, 1864. A couple miles south of here, Shivington had his men drop their extra bags, and he split the group in two. He sent most of the 3rd Regiment, the inexperienced guys, out along the bluffs beyond that ridge behind me. On those bluffs is where most of the horses associated with the camp would have been, over 1,000 animals. And the job of the 3rd Regiment, drive those horses away from the camp. Meanwhile, most of the 1st Regiment, guys who have been in the Army a few years and have combat experience, Shivington sends the other direction, across the creek and towards the camp itself. As for the Cheyenne and Arapaho, the first they know anything's happening is some of the women, up early in the morning, hear the approach of many hooves, which they at first think is buffalo coming, which is very exciting. But some of the younger teenagers sent to check on the horse herd on the bluffs actually see what those hooves they can hear are attached to. And word soon spreads through the camp that it is soldiers approaching. Many of the chiefs believe this is the military coming to talk to them about peace, as was promised. Chief Blackkettle takes an American flag he was given some years earlier, puts it on a long pole, and leans it up against his lodge. Under it, he puts a white flag. Both symbols, he has been told, indicate the camp is peaceful, is friendly. Some of the other chiefs begin walking out from the camp to meet the soldiers, who by now are coming across the creek and dismounting from their horses. But the soldiers are not here to talk, and they open fire on the chiefs coming out to meet them. Of the 33 chiefs and headmen in this camp, about half of them are killed here. And the knowledge and wisdom that they held for the tribes is gone. But the soldiers don't just stop after shooting at the chiefs. They move on into the camp itself. And the 3rd Regiment, still up on the bluffs, can hear this attack happening. And they realize they're on horse herding duty, which is not what they enlisted to do. And almost to a man, they abandon their commanders, head down the bluffs, and into the camp as well. By this time, command structure amongst the soldiers is gone. As one officer would write later, it was every man on his own hooks. And the soldiers are shooting at anyone they can see. Men, women, children, the elderly, whoever. And the Arapaho and Cheyenne flee in whatever direction they can. Many people run northwest, up the course of the creek. Others run straight north across the plains. And according to the stories passed down by survivors, some people are chased up to 10 miles away. From the top of the hill, looking north, that's about where the horizon is. But even after the shooting stops, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, for the people who have survived, this isn't over. They can't just come back to camp and go about their lives. The soldiers are still here. Those survivors are stuck making their way to those other camps they know are out there. Closest ones, about 50 miles away. And it's not July and kind of hot like it is today. It's November. It's cold, it's windy, it's nighttime. Many of these people are hurt to some degree. And ever present is the fear that when the sun comes up again, the soldiers are going to start the pursuit. The soldiers don't do that. And those survivors do make their way to those other camps. And when they get there, word quickly spreads about what happened here at Sand Creek. And in the following months, The Cheyenne and Arapaho, joined by allies from other tribes, prepared to do something they almost never do. In retaliation for what took place here at Sand Creek, they prepared to make winter war. For the soldiers who were here, bit of a different story. After the shooting stops on November 29th, the soldiers stay here another day and a half, hunting down anyone still hiding in the area and taking trophies from the people they've killed. Scalps, fingers, ears, genitalia both male and female. On the third day, December 1st, they burn what's left of the camp and leave. The 1st Regiment ends up back at Fort Lyon. The 3rd Regiment and Colonel Shivington end up back in Denver. And when they get there, they're greeted as the returning heroes, as the men who have made the plains a safer place to be, who have dealt with this threat to their homes, families, and communities out here on the plains. There are parades in Denver for these men, reenactments in some of the local theaters, and Shivington calls this a glorious victory against 1,000 warriors. Yeah, more people than were here to begin with, let alone warriors. But Shivington's version of the story is not the only version being told at the time. Some of the soldiers who were here are telling a story that is very different. And among them are Captain Silas Soule and Lieutenant Joseph Kramer. Soule and Kramer were officers in the 1st Regiment. They had been stationed at Fort Lyon for several months. They are familiar with this particular group of Cheyenne and Arapaho and what they are trying to do. When Shivington brings their companies out here, Soule and Kramer refuse to fire a shot. They convince their companies to stand down as well. And when they return to Fort Lyon, Soule and Kramer write letters describing what they have seen here in a lot more detail than I went into. Those letters are sent up the chain of command in the military. They are seen by people in Washington, D.C. And in early 1865, those letters helped to start 3 separate federal investigations into what took place here. 2 by Congress, 1 by the military. By August of that same year, less than 12 months after this event has taken place, all 3 of those investigations agreed with each other that this was a massacre. And that's the word all 3 use in their reports. That's not a modern interpretation. It's in part because of those reports that in the Treaty of the Little Arkansas in October of 1865, a formal apology for what took place here at Sand Creek is written into the text of that treaty. And reparations, land, is promised to the survivors and the families of those who were killed. Reparations which to this day have not been paid. Unpaid reparations aside, an apology is words. Words do not change what took place here. Words do not change that about 230 people were killed here and left out on the plains. They are still there. Words do not change that by the late 1800s, there were no Arapaho or Cheyenne in Colorado anymore. They were forcibly moved to the places where they are today, in Montana, Wyoming, and Oklahoma. Pretty far from this place that they called home. But words also do not change the fact that the tribes are still there. They are very much alive today. Their stories, their histories are still being told. As I said in the beginning, this isn't one of those happy-go-lucky histories you get at most national parks. This is one of those darker bits of American history. But sometimes those darker bits of history are just as important as the feel-good stories. When you acknowledge those bad things that have happened in the past, you can learn from them. Try to make better decisions in the present, understanding what fear and hate can do to individuals and societies. And maybe, with that knowledge, we can help prevent things like the Sand Creek Massacre from happening again in the future. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer the best I can. If not, I want to thank